Hi, in this video, I'll be showing you why it is better to clean your data with Python than with SQL. So the data we'll be using today is a very simple table with 5 columns. It has the ID, the name, the city, the age, and the salary columns. But if you look closely, you would realize that there's some leading and trailing white spaces around each of the values. So for instance, for New York, you can see some leading and trailing white spaces for Denver. And if you look through the entire data, you would see that it's consistent all through. What we are going to try to do is to get rid of the white spaces on each of the values in this data set. I'll do this using SQL and I'll do this using Python, and you would see why it is better to clean your data with Python than with SQL. All right, let's head to SQL. I already imported the data here. As you can see, the table appears here, but you would not be able to see the white spaces on each of the values. So to get rid of the white spaces, we have to use the trim function. But the thing with SQL is that we have to apply that function on each of the individual columns, right? So we'll use our update command. We'll say update the test table, and then we're going to tell it to set. Let's start with the name column. Let's leave the ID column because I believe the ID column do not have spaces, right? So set the name column equals to trim the name column. So basically what this line of code will do is it will trim this name column. Basically what trim does is get rid of the white spaces, the trailing and the leading white spaces. And then after it has done that, it will now set that new value as the name column, right? So we're going to perform this for each of the individual columns. So let me just copy and paste instead of typing it manually. So I'll just paste 4 times because there are 4 different columns we want to do that on. And then I'll edit the values. So set city equals to trim city, and set age equals to trim age. I doubt if the age has trailing or leading white spaces, but you know what? Let's just go through everything. So what this lines of code will do is it will trim each of these individual columns and then set that as the new values. So if we run this, that would have happened. And then if we say select all the columns from the test table, and then we run this, all the trailing and leading white spaces would have gone off. We can be sure by exporting this as a CSV file. So let me export this, and then let's check it with Visual Studio Code. You can see that all the trailing and the leading white spaces has been deleted, right? So it took us about 5 lines of code to achieve this with SQL. Now let's try to achieve the same thing with using Python. So let me open up my Jupyter notebook and let's get right into it. I'll create a new notebook and I'll import the pandas library and import the data, or read in the data rather. So let me see the name of the data. Sample data with whitespace.csv. Check in the downloads folder. Sample data with white spaces. Okay, all lowercase. Sample data with white spaces. .csv. Let me confirm that. Okay, white space. And then when you check the data sets, it's still the data set with the white spaces. Let's try to check the white spaces. So for instance, let me check the name column. Let's put it in form of a list so we can see those white spaces clearly. All right, so you can see that Alice has trailing and leading white spaces. Bob also has white space, Charlie, and so on. So we can confirm that yes, the data has a couple of white spaces. So what we'll try to do now is get rid of the white spaces in one line of code using Python. right? So we'll say data frame dot, then we'll use the apply map function so that we can iterate through all the individual rows in each of the columns. So we'll say lambda, then x, then we'll use the strip function on each of the individual values. And we would also use a conditional, right? So we're going to say if in each instance of x, if it's a string, right? This is not necessary, but we have to apply it because we only want to apply the strip function on strings. So if it is string, we should apply the strip function, else we should just produce the value that was there before. So with this line of code, we can perform the same task that we performed using SQL. Basically, we have a conditional, we have a lambda function that iterates through each value in each row in each column, right? So it will go through each column and check for strings. If it is string, then it will strip it of the leading and trailing white spaces. Else, it will just return the value that was there before. So when we do this, let's try to assign it to a new variable. Let's call this that frame dot cleaned. Um, I think I made instance, not instance, right? All right. So if we check our data frame underscore cleaned, we can see that it's now clean, even though we can't see it. So let's do the same thing we did the last time. Data frame underscore cleaned. Let's check the name column and then let's show it in form of a list. Um, underscore cleaned. And now you can see that there are no trailing or leading white spaces as compared to how it was before. No trailing and leading white spaces. So the data frame has been rid of all the trailing and leading white spaces. And we achieved this just using one line of code in Python. Whereas in SQL, we had to use 5 lines of code. So I hope you can see how it is better to actually clean your data with Python than it is to do it with SQL. We didn't have to apply the trim function on each of the different columns one by one. All we needed to do is just write the conditional that went through the entire data set and checked if it was a string, then apply the strip function on each value of the row. All right, that's all for today's video. Thank you.